I'm the coolest man that's ever lived. You're the worst.
No, I'm the best.
I'm still constituting that this is both floppier and bigger.
I'm pretty sure mine is bigger because it has all 4 books in it.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, like, actually, dimensions wise, like, it's like the size of your. Oh wait, that is big. God, way to make me feel small.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. It's Grace, and I have Ben with me. And if you watched the previous video that we did for oh my god, what's the previous book called? Help me out here.
Betrayal in Winter.
Thank you. We are going to be doing something really similar. We're going to be talking about An Autumn War, which is the 3rd book in the Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. So I will let Ben introduce himself.
I'm the same person from the last time.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
It was very informative, especially since you didn't actually introduce yourself last time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm that person still.
I will have him linked in the description. So again, you can go open the mystery box if you want. Anyway, we are going to do a very similar format to what we did last time, which is going to be, we're going to start off by kind of, without spoilers, talking about our like things that we liked and maybe some negatives for this book. And then after that, we are going to get into a spoiler chat for just what we thought. Like, we might follow like characters' plot, but I feel like we're just going to end up talking
around
generally in spoilers about An Autumn War. So I guess we'll start with, like, maybe it's better to start with negatives so that we can then move into a positive. And I know that you have a negative, so do you want to tell us?
My only big negative with the book is that I think of course, like, each book transitions 10 years. I feel like we don't need to explain the plot of the book because anyone watching this has already read the first 2 books, otherwise they're insane. And so, like, the transition of the 10 years, I think, is a tad more rushed and kind of inelegant in some ways compared to how it was like done between the first and second, because the first and second was still dealing with a smaller plot, whereas some things that feel like throwaway at the start of this book, where you're kind of like, one sentence, you're just like, oh, okay, and then you just meant to kind of have that in your head, and then it comes back later and it's a big thing. It just feels like the introduction of some ideas was just real. We just need this here because we need it later. So that's my only real negative, to be fair.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Like, it didn't bother me so much. Like, I remember you saying that it did at the time, and like, I didn't think about it too much, but I definitely agree still. Like, of the 2 transitions that we've done, this one wasn't as smooth. And it seemed like in some ways a lot more had changed between Betrayal in Winter and An Autumn War, and there was more to deal with, especially with adding like character perspectives. So just wasn't quite as smooth.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if I really have a negative, because I gave the book 5 stars and it was my favorite one so far. But I agree with you on that one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly can't think of a negative to say.
No, that's pretty much it for me as well.
Yeah.
Like, and this is like the first maybe like 5 chapters, maybe like barely anything. Like, once the plot gets going, it's like, oh my god, this is amazing. But it's just that first little bit where I was kind of like, oh, I liked how they did it in the Betrayal of Winter more for that. You got to take they're roughly the same size, so it's not like it'd be weird if this book was like 100 pages longer to set all this up. So it makes sense.
Yeah, well, and like you said with the plot, like, it did integrate into the plot. It just wasn't quite as smooth. So I guess I'll move into a positive, because that kind of just reminded me of like what I wanted to say. And mine is kind of a combination of things, because it's like the character perspectives that we added, and then the reason that that's connected to my other thing is because it's like the widening of the story and the world, and the characters that we added were like necessitating that and actually giving us that. So you mentioned like in Betrayal and Winter, we're still dealing with kind of a smaller storyline. It's probably why it was easier to transition. But one of my favorite things about this book was how we finally got like to explore more of the world, and then the plot was relevant in, like, the plot was happening in a lot more locations, even if we were only following characters in a few places. I mean, I'm trying to say it without saying any spoilers, but I feel like given that the book is called An Autumn War, can kind of infer that the thing that's happening in a lot of places is war.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't think you need some kind of degree to work that out or anything.
no, not exactly. But what did you think about that?
I think that the payoff to having smaller plots to facilitate the larger plot in this is really well done. In terms of, this is like when you read the back of these books and they're always like the new George R.R. Martin, and I'm always like, what are people talking about? This is the first one that had an actual character and a plot that felt like something out of a George R.R. Martin. Like, I'll save the character. But yeah, this is the first time it actually felt like maybe people are accurate in some way throwing that name out there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I do get it in a way because of Daniel Abraham's actual personal connection to George R. R. Martin. I feel like
Yeah,
that may also tempt people into putting that label on it, because if George R. R. Martin was a mentor to him, then people probably want to be like, oh my God, Daniel Abraham, he's going to be the guy. But
yeah.
I agree with you. Like, there are plots and characters and like their motivations and actions in this book that are gray and like questionable and can, yeah, be a lot like easier compared to him.
I would say like my main positive is that the way that I see this actually being like in a Song of Ice and Fire style thing is that I genuinely didn't know what side was going to come out on top. Um, or what was going to happen at any point. It was genuinely like, it's not like one of those things where you kind of have an inkling of what's going to happen. You're like, this makes sense plot wise. I feel like the characters and that type of thing. It's just like things happen, and then you're like, oh, this makes sense. Like even if you're not expecting it. Like some of the character work, for instance, not to give spoilers, but Marty is a character that I thought was slightly underdeveloped in the last book, but what happens in with him being an instrumental force here redeems that. It makes that character, the what he goes through in the book 2, pay off and feel really like cathartic for what happens.
Yeah.
um so that's probably like my main positive in that sense, is that I don't know. I completely lost what I was going to say.
Do you want me to take it? Because I had another thing.
Absolutely.
Like, one thing that you said was what I was actually going to say was another one of my favorite things, and that was the fact that like things that ended up happening, they did make sense. Like, I was with you where I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but one of the reasons that I really liked the ending was once you get there, you think like, okay, even though I didn't see this coming, it was set up, and like this was the natural progression, and it felt satisfying and it paid off. Like, it made sense, which is
Yeah.
basically what you said. So that was one of my favorite things, because like the
It's
ending was insane.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of like, because I quite often like to guess what's going to happen, and like I pitched you an idea, and I remember you being like, "Oh, that makes sense. That'd be like real cool." And
Mhm.
then like when that happens, sometimes when you have an idea of like, "Oh, all these things are set up for an ending. This would be a real cool ending," and then it doesn't happen. Quite often, it's disappointing. Whereas in this, when you have that curveball and what is set up doesn't quite happen how you expect it, it's more rewarding for that.
He's still
The
staring
cat.
at me. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
That's all right.
and I it's my cat for everyone else. He's just sitting right behind my laptop staring at me.
You can
Very
show it.
intensely. But yeah, with the ending thing, it's sort of like looking back, it was like, I can't believe I didn't see that coming, but it was because it was such a good balance of it being hinted at while also not being laid out for you. So like it happens and then you're like, oh no, like it makes sense, but I kind of hate that it does.
Yeah. It's funny, like this will probably stray into spoilers.
Okay. Well, we
Okay.
can put timestamps down if we should we just go into spoilers?
I feel like we've said a lot of positives.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yeah.
read this goddamn series.
This
It's
this book was so good. Like
yeah.
I'm never gonna be one of those people who's like, oh, you have to make it to the third book, because I still believed that the first two books were
The
great
first two books
too.
slap. Yeah,
But
and
like this one was so good. You
it's
have to
kind of
read it.
like in a world where duologies exist that have like 600 pages a book, and people moan about the length of Stormlight, but they'll read two books in a duology that add up to the same length, and they're basically one big book, but because they're split as two, people are like, that's better. This is the same. Like, this is four like 300-page books
Yeah, they're
that
not
add
that
up to the
long.
size of like one Stormlight or one Wheel of Time book, and you get the entire series. Like, it's we read it over months, but you could read it and probably finish it in like 3
Couple
weeks.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. And like that's why I think it's the big, like, why people should read it, because it's not one of those series where you're gonna have to put yourself down. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna read this between 2023.
You see these little tabs?
Oh, little tappy tabs.
That's each book. They're not that long.
Bingo bango.
Yeah.
Everyone should read it.
Everyone
But in spoilers,
in spoilers. Okay.
it's that I had an inkling of what the ending was going to be, because I of course like gave you a shout that like was in the realm of it, but did not go as dark, because I
Yeah.
genuinely didn't expect the book to go as dark as it did. Which I guess, like, looking back, like with what happens in the first book with Seedless, like that's the thing, everything's set up,
Mhm.
but I didn't expect it to be as messed up, even though I should have.
That's part of the thing where, like, well, yeah, you were just saying it, like you should have. I felt like I should have seen it coming too, because the level of darkness that it went for, like, it was dark, but it also created a situation where the like two populations, the Galts and then, oh my god, what are they called?
The Kayam.
Kaim. um that they literally have to, like, they have to coexist if they want a future generation. So in that sense, I was like, okay, this created an unavoidable path forward, I guess. So it made sense in that sense. I'm like, I should have seen this coming.
Yeah. Big shout out to Missing Stone Made Soft.
Oh, I know.
I was very happy with his speech that of course foreshadows what happens at the end. But I was very sad to watch him go.
I was
And
really
not,
hoping that he was gonna make a return. But then
yeah,
again, I suppose that would mean him being bound again, and then it's sort of like,
yeah, exactly.
I feel like I appreciate the time that we got with him.
Yeah.
He's just a really
Big,
cool character.
absolutely. And a big shout out to Androgynous Sterile. I
Yeah.
don't think we get enough androgynous characters in fantasy or in any fiction, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. Well, I really liked that, the fact that it was seedless but wasn't, like, at the same
Yeah,
time. That's very interesting. I feel like we hadn't seen that up to this point. We had heard a lot of talk about how, like, the poets work and how, like, it's tough to rebind and undat because then you have to do something different. But we hadn't seen it. Like, we hadn't seen how it could be the same and yet different.
yeah.
So
Marty's the best character in this book for me. Like, because when you read Betrayal of Winter, like I said, Marty's consistently failing
Yeah.
and becoming worse. And at the time, I was like, this isn't satisfying. But then when you get to this one and realize it's the beginning of an arc to his fall, makes it so much more interesting. Like, and like the form that Sterile takes, where it's seen like all of his failings, pretty much. You've got Seedless,
Yeah.
you've got what is her name?
Leah?
Yeah, Liat.
Oh,
It's
okay.
they say like they said that it has Liat's features, has some of Nayit, I think, as well. They say.
Does it have
Um,
any of Hashai?
I don't. I think Seedless is meant to represent that kind of failure.
There.
So I feel like it amalgamates all of what he sees as his failings, and that's where it becomes obvious that it hasn't worked. It's like he did not. Well, you knew it was going to fail once he put the when it became like dark, when he was using it as a weapon.
Yeah.
That's when you're like, oh, Marty, you're making a big mistake.
And it becomes so much more of like a personal tragedy when he's putting that protection in that a failure to bind wouldn't kill him, but then it backfires and ended up being the fact that like it can't hurt him, but it can hurt literally everyone else as the
Yeah,
price.
which also goes with his character of being someone that is pretty selfish.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he flip-flops constantly, like what he wants, and like the idea of leaving like the Daikavo, and like he constantly thinks about what if he'd left with Liat and everything, and it seems like he's going that way. But the moment there's a glimmer of success for him or any kind of fame, he's straight back into it, and he's like, I would sacrifice everything again to go be with Daikavo again. And
And
it's like,
you could see, oh, sorry, wait, no,
oh
continue.
no, no, go on.
Well, I was going to say, you could definitely see that when he makes the flip, like you said, into using it as a weapon, because once he solves the puzzle and realizes what he can do to bind the Ondat again, you can definitely see that inside his head. Like,
Yeah,
he's like, oh, I'm going to be the person to save everyone. And that was like
yeah,
hyper fixation. And you, like, nobody probably would have been able to convince him that this was a bad idea because he was so hyper fixated on finally like succeeding at something and getting recognition and fame and being that person.
yeah. That's this is the thing. He was so good that I kind of forget about other characters. Like
Well, he
it,
definitely had the main, like, because obviously you had Balasar and Sinja on the other side
yeah,
fighting against what Mati was trying to do. But in terms of like the Kaim, he was he was their goal, because once they lost the Onda, they were relying on him and Kamai to rebind one. Like that was their actual major thing.
yeah,
So like Ota and Kian and like their children, they were interesting in this book. And I liked watching Ota like try and become a general and like lead armies, which is something that they've never done before. Like I did enjoy him in this book, but
yeah.
he wasn't the star.
Yeah. It kind of falls into the same way that Marty and Otar weren't the biggest thing last book.
Yeah.
Otar kind of falls into that again, where he was still really interesting. I really enjoyed his tactics and what was happening and everything. But I enjoyed more both Nayit's relationship with Otar and his relationship with Marty as well, and what happened there, rather than Otar in particular.
I think that's something that we kind of said in the last video too. Like there's something to be said for Ota having extremely interesting relationships.
Yeah, Otar's like a facilitator.
Yeah.
Nayit, Nayit was a cool character. He
Yeah.
was also he's cheating like everyone in
He
this.
represented that. Obviously it wasn't as heavy handed in this book, um, as heavy of a theme, but he definitely represented that continuation of the infidelity theme.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if anything, we find out that he's doing it more than everyone else.
Yeah.
Like
When
He's
he admits to having slept with like half of the girls that he's met, or women that he's met since leaving
yeah,
wife and son, that is unreal.
big yikes.
Yeah.
But I also really like the one part in this book that almost made me cry was when Marty and I have the first conversation in the pub. That scene I thought was fantastic. Like both of their feelings and like Marty's reaction to being called father and like wanting to be called father and everything. That bit broke me. I was like, oh,
I,
and
I agree with you. I liked that one a lot. I don't
yeah,
think that made me cry. Other parts did, but I can't remember. Well, I do remember the one part that made me cry was when um the messenger from the other city, is it Satani? That's the other city's name, right?
yeah.
When he came and like just told
Oh, yeah.
Kian, I think it was Kian that was having that conversation. And it was just like, we need your help. We don't have anything.
Yeah,
And for some
outside the
reason,
town,
that
right?
the delivery of that line just like made me tear up. There were other parts in that same chapter too. I think it
Yeah,
was chapter 18. But I'm really bad.
yeah.
I cry so much that I don't really
You
remember
do, to be fair. It's not.
the specific things that make me emotional.
um,
I feel like we should talk about, unless you have more on that, which we can come back to it, obviously, but I think we should talk about the Galts and Balasar.
yeah, Balazar.
And I really enjoyed both, like both characters being like Sinja and Balasar being the two main characters sort of in that location slash
Yeah,
story. I really loved both of them.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I really liked how it was shocking to me how quickly he made Balasar like an understandable character. I guess he's not a protagonist, really. He's the antagonist, but he was so understandable. And like, usually when a antagonist is that single-minded, I'm like, oh, you're kind of boring. But he definitely wasn't, just because like you could see he built up his lifelong journey to this point, to like
yeah.
doing all of dedicating his life to trying to wipe out the Ondat and like make sure that the Kaim, I guess his goal was just to bring the cities to their knees. But he was so, I don't even know how to describe it. He was very like charismatic, I guess, and a good leader, and like you could just, I don't know, you could sympathize so quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's because we've been following the Kaim
Hmm.
and we've seen the awful things they can and have done.
Hmm.
And because of that, like when you're a civilization that's just chilling with slaves, it's hard to really sympathize with you. So like when he's like, yeah, maybe we should go. Do you know the one that has all of us hostage pretty much? Maybe we should go kill them. It's kind of you can kind of go, yeah, Balazar, I think you should.
The other
And
thing that's interesting about that is like that kind of makes sense why the first two books had to just focus on
yeah,
the Kaim, because like if you just started the series from the perspective of the Galts, you would
you'd
probably
want them
never
to
have
win.
any sympathy towards like the main characters that we do have.
No, exactly. That's what this does really well is that you care about the characters but understand the society is faulty.
Yeah.
Um, and you then you don't want the Golds to win, but you want the Golds to win. Like if you get what I mean, like in
Yeah.
terms of you actually want a standstill.
Yeah,
You
you're like,
want
if this didn't mean the death of all the characters that we care
yeah
about, then like, yeah, you would probably want them to win.
yeah,
But it
or at the
does
very
do
least you want
that.
the Andat gone. You want it open.
Yeah.
Um, which I mean, you could get into the whole concept of what that means in like in relation to the real world and all that jazz, but um, in terms of this in particular, the
Mhm.
idea of one superpowered nation having all the other ones kneel to them is yeah, you understand why they want to get rid of them. Um, and Sinjar's a cool character. I was not a fan of Sinjar to start with. I
I
don't know
was
about.
pretty, I mean, okay, he didn't do that much for me in Betrayal in Winter, but like I was pretty interested in him because like I was curious to see whether he was actually still on their side or not. And I feel like Daniel Abraham did a really good job of like not making it really clear. Like you didn't really know.
Yeah,
Like he came up with ways to delay the Galts and like help Ota, but then he's in a situation where you're like, well, he might be pushed to just like commit some horrible acts against the people that he came from. And yeah.
he reminded me of because he was going to be the character I said that reminded me of a George R. R. Martin character, but in reality, I think he reminds me more of a Joe Abercrombie character, which is just someone that is in an awful situation and has absolutely no idea what they're going to do. Even when they're doing it, he just has no idea. And that makes the character compelling because you're just like, I don't know. He doesn't know what he's doing. So I definitely don't have an idea what he's doing. And
Yeah.
and
And it's
that
like the
makes,
sense of self-preservation like pulling him along, because it's not as though he's just being swept along by the plot. Like he sort of is at, his situation is sort of out of his own control, but he also does have a lot of control over like
yeah,
how his own actions are going to impact the outcomes of the war. So it's
his
still compelling.
yeah, like his interactions with Balazar are great.
Mm-hmm.
Um and like in particular, like the that's the best scene between Balazar and Sinjar is where the poet, he kills the poet,
Mm-hmm.
and the poet calls him Char, I think.
He calls him,
Um
yeah, because that's
yeah,
the,
yeah,
yeah.
is the like the friend title, like the equal title. And I really liked Balazar.
It's the one for like a family member or a lover that he calls him, or like a really close friend.
Yeah.
His cha is just the one for like a friend or an equal, right?
Is it? I don't remember. Either way, it's whatever the really friendly
He
one is.
calls him the most personal one.
Yeah, and then I really like Balazar's like being like something seemed funny there, and then realizing and then questioning Sinjar and watching that whole thing break down. That's probably like because I didn't clock that at first, and then when Balazar starts questioning it, I looked back up and I was like, oh no! And then like that's what was so good about it is that because the
Okay.
world building is so intricate, sometimes you just gloss over it because it's just flowing through your head, and then when the character points it out, you're like, oh, and
I
that
did
was my
catch
favorite
it,
scene.
to be honest.
Huh?
I did catch it,
Oh, really?
but it was still just as good of a scene.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I was like, oh, he's definitely gonna notice that. And then
yeah.
he did. And it was great.
Big
Um,
brain Grace.
oh yeah.
Who else did I talk about? Oh, Keanu and Liat's relationship's real cool.
That was really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I liked that there was some understandable animosity at first because, like, obviously, you don't exactly want to just be like, have these people tossed into your life where it's like, oh, yeah, this is actually your husband's son and the woman that he had him with.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, here.
Right in your face.
It's a little awkward.
Yeah,
um but I liked that they didn't shy away from the fact that they were both really like capable women, and they ended up being the ones to like run things while
yeah.
Ota was gone. Like they're like, okay, we can put aside our differences because this is important and everyone is relying on us.
And also is realistic based on like real world World War II. All the men leave, women take over and run everything. Like it's
Oh yeah.
it's it's
Yeah.
not it's not like some people like it's not one of those things where people can go like, oh, where they're just, oh, well, you have to have strong female women, oh, that type of thing. This is like, no, no,
No.
no. Do you get what I mean? Like where some people will have that complaint, like the whole like Sansa season 8 type thing where people are just like, wow, bloody. Whereas this is like, no, no, no. These are well set up, strong characters. Liat has learned from
Amat.
Amat, and that kind of thing. Kian we've already seen her with the Way House and everything, have that style of management. It makes sense. And they just do what needs to be done.
I also
And
really
then
liked that was what Liat was doing with her life in the meantime, because
I
like
also, yeah.
that was her original job and her original goal. And then obviously she got sidetracked from that, but then I liked that she went back and got back to that and like
Yeah.
kind of lived the life that we were seeing her live as a teenager, but she got to do it. She got to run the, like, is it the estate?
Yeah,
Or
it's something like that. Or like the trading house or something.
yeah.
But of course, like that's still also fueled by trauma, because the whole reason she's there is because she's keeping an eye on the goals. Like
Yeah.
that's what she says, that she's been tracking that what the goals have done since Seedless. And so like her memory of Saraket is still evidently like leading her to who she is now.
Mhm.
And whilst we didn't see her in Betrayal of Winter, we can gather that she's been on this the same, because we know what Amat was like in the first book, and then we know what Liat's like now. We can piece together that she has been just as laser focused on tracking the goals.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Because she was the only one that noticed like enough evidence to actually put it all together and not
yeah,
just have it be like coincidences. And you could definitely tell that she has like great attention to detail, because it was ships, right? She noticed that
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
things were leaving on certain ships, and I can't remember all the details, but I'm sure she could.
And then I think pretty much the last character I in particular have to talk about is Aya.
I was gonna bring her up
Yeah.
too,
Do you
eventually.
want to go with Aya?
No, you go.
Aya was Aya is probably the most well-rounded character in terms of the younger generation being a mirror of who came before them, in the sense of that she has kind of Liat's no not Liat, but also Liat. Like she's kind of amalgamation of all four in terms of Otar, Kian, Liat, and Marty. Um, and like even though Liat of course wasn't there, what I mean is from like a character construction point of view, she has the kind of unruly nature, that kind of not knowing what she wanted to do, that Liat had in the first book. She has kind of Marty's not necessarily egotistical, not that far, but that kind of knowing she can do more and knowing she can be more influential. um she has that kind of Otar's demanding and kind of she's just a kind of amalgamation of all four, I think.
Mhm.
And that makes it quite often when you have older characters, you're following the older characters, you can be frustrated with the younger characters for being unruly. And like when she does what she does and she's being a bit boisterous, uh normally you'd be quite frustrated probably with her, and it's quite easy to be like, oh, I hate these kid characters. But she's fascinating in how, like, looking at a different perspective. We're used to watching like Otar, and is like quite poor in the first book, and that type of thing. This is probably our first character that's like creme de la creme, born rich,
Yeah.
like an upper class like childhood that we're seeing, compared to people rising up the ranks. She's already there pretty much. um
Oh, that did not sound like the end of your point, but
I
that's
do have so much more to say, but I also know that I don't want to just keep talking.
okay. Well, I think that one thing that you like, I'm sure you've considered, but that you didn't say when you were talking about how she's kind of an amalgamation of all four, is that I feel like Kian has a really like she has the ability to have a really calming nature and like a steady presence. And I feel like Aya kind of has that when she learns that she enjoys like medicine.
Yeah,
She is a little bit eager though, like when we see her actually trying to treat Liat, she's a little eager, but I feel like that part of her, like will be part of her character from
yeah,
Kian, and that'll help her. And like she also, both of her parents are really like logical, smart people. So she definitely gets that as well. Um, I don't really know what else I can say. You said like a lot.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of went off. The problem, like the other thing is also I feel like you can see the influences of the parents in terms of like it's referenced that Ota kind of worries what if she ends up like a Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Um and you can kind of feel that where Ota can sometimes be a little, he tries to be really nice to her. Almost like he, yeah, it's kind of like he's just a little worried. You can see it sometimes. And then I imagine you'll want to talk about this scene quite a lot, is the Kian and
Oh,
Aya
I love
scene.
that. I love that
Yeah.
scene. First, though, I was going to say that I don't think, like, I think that you're right about Ota, but I think that, well, they probably wouldn't rehash any Dawn character because she was done so well in the second book. But I think that the reason that she wouldn't end up like that is like, if we're going to see her become a physician, then she's going to have a position and be respected in her own right,
Yeah.
no matter what her like family or marital status would be. And I have a feeling that that's where she's going,
Yeah.
as being like a really respected figure, like in the 15 years or whatever since we see her. But that's like, aside from that, the scene with Kian and Aya goes back to what you were saying about how it would be easy to be frustrated with the younger kids. And obviously what Aya does is kind of like not well thought out, just impulsive, like teenager stuff, just doing it, like stealing something with her friends because it's either like peer pressure, just because they think they can or whatever. But I thought that it was a good balance of like recognizing that it's frustrating, but then not letting that storyline get too like, they didn't run away with it. Like
Yeah.
Keon literally nipped it in the bud
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Kian
he was
stomped on it.
stone cold. But it was really like, I think it just goes to show who Kian and Ota are and how they would have raised her. And like, obviously, as a teenager, she's going to make mistakes, but then they're just going to present her with like a really logical, like they're going to reprimand her and punish her, but they're also at the same time going to present her with a really like logical argument about why
Yeah.
that's stupid and why she shouldn't do that.
It's like like yeah, like Kiana in that scene is literally like it, she doesn't even need to say anything really. She's just kind of like, you really just made a mistake then, didn't you? And she's like, yep, I now that you point it out, I've realized that I made quite the mistake in saying that. And I like the idea, I like the fact that Otar just kind of sits there stunned, and it's Kian that's like, all right, we need to this ain't leaving this room.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, I really like that scene.
I think that a lot of what you said about Aya, I just kind of I agree with in general. So I really liked that. I really like that it seems like she's gonna then be the next generation and continue to like be a main character and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's great. And I think we're just gonna go into talking about the end of the book now and then wrap it up. So um I mean, the end was like literally crazy. I remember we changed our schedule because we were
Yeah.
like, there's no way that we're going to wait to read the last little bit of this. We're all going to die if we try and wait another day. But I was a huge fan of how it all played out. Like, even though it went really dark, I do like that in like books because it didn't shy away from basically the worst possible, well, no, I guess it's not the worst possible
No,
outcome.
it's definitely not the
A
worst,
pretty
but
painful outcome. And
bittersweet.
it was definitely painful because like of the fact that Aya's in the room when it happens. So you get to
Yeah.
see her suffer firsthand, and like Mati gets to see her suffer.
Yeah.
And that really brings it home for him and what he did. And then
Oh,
go ahead.
sterile, calling out Marty's inappropriate relationship with Aya was mad. that was one of my favorite bits, because reading it, sometimes like reading the start of the book, sometimes I felt like Marty's a little weird around Aya. It's weird that they're spending this much time together. And then at the end, when it's addressed and Steril's like, you were basically trying to make her fall in love with you. You weren't doing it,
Mm-hmm.
but you were trying to.
It was
And
low key enough that like throughout the
yeah,
book I was like, I can't exactly tell whether this is inappropriate. Like they could just have like an affectionate like uncle relationship or whatever, but it could be. And like if
yeah,
she gets a little older and Mati gets weird, then
which
it
is
was
so realistic.
really
I
bad.
really appreciated it.
Yeah.
Like just it wasn't a plot point, but it was there. It was an undercurrent through the entire book.
This
And
is not, it's not funny, but it's a little funny that Steril's like, while we're all like shitting on Mati,
yeah.
let's just add the fact that you also did this.
Yeah. You're a quasi nonce. Like they're just to finish it off. Marty's like, oh my god, everyone's barren because of me. I've destroyed everything. He's like, and you're also a quasi nonce, you weirdo. It's like,
Don't
oh
forget
yeah.
about this.
Sterile stood there like, look what you made. You made. Look at me. I'm the most androgynous, sexy being ever to exist. This is what you made. Yeah, so that's my only little bit there. I did appreciate that bit. That
That's
you
your
go
only
back and
thought on the ending?
no. That's my thought on like that Aya, that the relationship. Because that's an undercurrent through the whole book, but I like the
Yeah.
culmination there. Uh
All right, give me your thoughts on the ending. That clap probably sounded really loud. Let's go.
the ending was satisfying and bittersweet. It was horrifying, but also probably the best outcome that could have happened to move forward
Yeah.
and not have like a cycle of violence continue.
Yeah, that's because that's what I was kind of saying before about how much sense the ending makes. And like Sterile basically forced both of them to cooperate. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever seen those like big t-shirts where it's like two kids in it and it's like, this is our get along t-shirt?
Oh my god.
That's what Sterile did to them.
Oh my god.
You like that analogy? I was pretty
Yeah.
good. Um, but that's what
Oh,
Sterile did to them. I'm
that's
sorry.
true. That is true. I won't be able to imagine it another way now. Every time I imagine them together, Otar and Balazar are going to be in a jumper like that. Also, it makes sense from Steroid's point of view because he can't let he could let the Golts win,
Mhm.
but I think with Seedless always had sympathy for Marty. Like in the first book. So I think it makes sense as well that he still kind of wants the kind to survive because like he has that little bit of affection
Mhm.
for Marty. So I think it makes sense that because of course if you let the Golts win, they'd burn everything and that could be freed. But also the way they've done it, the Andak could see that they'd have to like the only way they could forge forward is to get rid of the Andak, ultimately freeing them forever. So it seemed like a way forward for them to be able to fully free themselves.
And the only way to move forward with like to truly like move forward in a cooperative way is for the Galts and the Kaim to mix. And
Yeah,
like they're literally gonna have to mix if they want to produce the next generation. So
basically, this book is an anti-nuclear like nuclear weapon book. Um, in terms of like the idea of two like a superpower nation having to stand down to be able to like create a unified world pretty much.
yeah.
And like that's how I've always seen it, is that the Andat pretty much are like an allegory for nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I think that the other thing that's interesting is that like the obviously the Kaim didn't feel that they needed other defenses, but I did think it was interesting that the Galts, like even though they haven't come out into the open until this book, we've gotten hints dropped throughout the whole series that they're like a military superpower.
Yeah.
And like other countries or whatever that don't have the Ondat can't stand against the Galt military strength.
Mm-hmm.
So they become like, once the Ondat are gone, they are the superpower. And just because they have like, just because it was the arrogance of the Kime to never think that they needed anything else beyond that, which goes back to that Stone Made Soft quote.
Exactly. And I also love that like the Kaim are soft magic, like not soft but softer in terms of like
pretty soft, like
and then the Galts are like a almost industrial military complex. And like it's like the two polar opposites of fantasy.
Very low magic, like no magic.
No magic,
yeah. They don't have.
They've got steam engines, which is badass. And that's what I mean, like because they don't have that, they upgrade in a different way. It's the kind of they balance, like the two versions balance that way.
Yeah.
Feels like a Joe Abercrombie book is fighting a Wheel of Time book.
So, I mean, do you have any other like points that you'd like to make? Because I think we've covered a lot of ground.
No. That's me done.
You really looked like you were going to say something.
I was going to say that I think there's a chance that like Idan still has me on the cusp of I like her character more than anything else so far. But An Autumn War is a better book.
Fair enough.
That's my kind of overall thoughts, is that I still think she's the best character. Second to Marty now, actually. Marty is a great character.
He is.
Yeah, they're my final thoughts.
Okay. Well, my final thoughts are that this book was amazing and I loved it and it was the best one so far. I am really excited to read Price of Spring, which, because we're filming this video so late, we're going to be doing so soon.
We will.
We only have like 3 days until we start it, and I am pumped. So I guess that is it for us. I think we made pretty good time this time. I'm proud of us. And I will just say thank you to anyone who made it to the end of the video. Thank you for listening to us. You should definitely go check out Ben's channel and subscribe to him. And I mean, like this video if you liked it. Hopefully you will also subscribe to me. And I'll see you in my next video. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Bye, future Ben.